Hello everyone, it's Karen from Stamping with Karen Spreckley here again, and it's another Monday video for you. So last week I shared a gift bag made using the Modern Heart stamp set, and this week I'd like to share with you how to make this really lovely blingy ombre heart card. So I'm using the Modern Heart stamp set again, so you get lots of nice images in this stamp set, as well as some really lovely sentiments. So let's get going. I'm just going to move this out of my way for a point of reference, as I usually do. So the bits and pieces that we need to make this card today are, I've got half a sheet of petal pink cardstock cut in half and scored in half. I have got a white mat for the inside of my card. So I've cut that 1/2 centimetre shorter and narrower than my card base, so that's to fit on the inside. On this example here I've used gold foil, but today I'm going to try it out with copper and see how that looks. So I've got a copper layer here. No, that's my spare bit of copper. I've got a copper layer here that measures 12.9 by 8.5 centimetres. And then I've got another petal pink layer here, which measures 8 by 12.4 centimetres. So I've gone 2 centimetres shorter and narrower on the foil, and 2.5 centimetres shallower and narrower on the petal pink. I've also got some of the pink organdy ribbon here that I shall be using to decorate the card. I've also got a scrap of petal pink cardstock that we'll be inking on and then embossing the heart on to make the embellishment to go on our card. I've got a scrap of copper cardstock here and one of the layering circles dies, which we will also emboss, and this time I'm going to emboss with the scripty embossing folder rather than the subtle embossing folder, which is what I used first time around. So let's get going with the inking up of the cardstock so that we can then get our heart stamped on it. So as I've done before, I'm going to use my glycerin to help me with my blending. So I'm just going to put 3 drops of glycerin on there. So glycerin is available from any pharmacist and even the cookware section of your supermarket. It's cheap as chip stuff, but it really helps with blending inks. Now I've used petal pink cardstock, but I'm going to use Calypso coral ink just to take things up a little bit, to add the texture to my card. So I'm going to get a little bit of ink on my sponge first. I'm then going to pick up that glycerin as well, and then I'm just going to start in a corner. Because the stamp will go there, I'm actually going to ink my cardstock up across a corner. So I'm just going to rub it in a little bit into my sponge, and then starting off the edge and moving on, I'm going to start adding ink to my cardstock. So I'm starting darker because I'm going to want it darker at the bottom, and then going lighter as I move up. So time for a little bit more ink now. So go through the same again, ink, bit of glycerin, wipe it off a little bit, and then onwards we move up the cardstock. So I'll just keep bringing my stamp back in to roughly gauge where I want this colour to be, because I do want it to be ombre. I want there to be some of the actual petal pink at the top. I don't want it to all be Calypso coral. There we go. So let's just have another little tester. I'm just going to go in just maybe a little bit darker right in this bottom corner, and I think that's us just about done. So I'm not going to need that Calypso coral ink pad anymore, so I can pop that away. Just going to turn over my grid paper so that it's not too disturbing. Now what I'm going to need to do before I add any embossing powder to this panel is I am going to need to dry it off a bit. So I'm just going to get my heat tool out, so apologies for the bit of noise. I just need to make sure that that ink and glycerin is properly dry otherwise my embossing powder will stick to everything. As I've used copper foil for this card, I'm also going to use some of our copper embossing powder. The embossing powder comes in quite a few different colours. We've got it in clear, in white, we've got it in black, silver, gold, copper, and also some newer shimmery colours as well that are new to us this year, which I haven't even tried out yet, but I'll be looking forward to having a little play with them. Now I'm hoping that's going to be dry enough now. A way to test it is actually, before I've even stamped anything on it, is just to pour some embossing powder over it. And if the embossing powder sticks to everything, which it has done, I know that I'm not dry yet. So I'm just going to reach down for a paintbrush to brush off all that embossing powder, because I don't want that on there yet. So I'm going to have to go back in with a little bit more drying. I was obviously a little bit premature on that one. So I hope everybody's had a really lovely weekend. I've had a nice weekend, relaxing Saturday, bit of exercise at the gym and then getting my hair cut. Yesterday I had a card class, and last night my lovely little granddaughter Evie came to stay for a couple of days. So as you may be watching this, we might be running around Woburn Safari Park having a whale of a time, because that's our plans for Monday. So much better now, we're almost there. So I think now with some application of the anti-static bag, I think that should be enough to absorb any final little bits of dampness that are absorbing that powder. So always use the embossing buddy when heat embossing to prevent powder going where you don't want it. And now I'm going to use my Versamark ink pad. So this is a sticky ink. I'm going to ink up my stamp there. Then I'm going to stamp this in the corner to make the most of my ombre ink panel. And then everybody have your fingers crossed for me. Let's hope we don't have too much embossing powder sticking where we don't want it. So on with the copper embossing powder. Oh, that's lovely. That's come out just about right. There's just a tiny little, oh, a couple of little flecks there. Should have used a smaller paintbrush really, but that'll be absolutely great because I'm going to be cutting this out anyway. So what I'm going to do now is pop the embossing powder back in the pot, because I don't want that going everywhere with the heat gun. So just fold up my coffee filter or piece of scrap paper, whatever it is you're using. Pop your embossing powder back in the pot, lid on so it's nice and safe and it won't go anywhere. Move any stray bits out of the way. Oh dear, I think I've knocked that. I'm going to go back in again. Can you see I've got a couple of spaces there where I seem to have knocked the embossing powder off. So I'm just going to go back in again, and hopefully there's just enough ink on there to pick that up for me. Now it's gone a little bit messy, so I'm just going to grab a detailed paintbrush this time, and I'm just going to gently knock off those specks that we don't want. Oh dear. And we'll perhaps go in again with a little bit more powder and a bit of a flick, and you know what, I think that'll do quite nicely. So powder out of the way again. I think I probably knocked it with my arm, didn't I, as I was tidying away. So heat gun back again, so quick bit of noise, but I'm sure this is going to melt quite quickly. So I'll hold this up near the camera, and hopefully you might be able to see the powder going from a yucky brown to a nice metallic copper colour. Don't know how well you can see that, but it always looks fabulous in real life. It's like alchemy. It's like magic. So if I tilt this up, oh yes, you can see that in the light now. That's catching the light. So what I need to do is I actually need to cut that out with my snips. And this is a lovely easy heart shape to cut out because of the fact it's got straight sides on all the sides. So I'll just cut that out. So I've got a nice piece of leftover for another project. So I'm just going to go in now and I'm going to cut just outside of the embossed lines. So I'm leaving just a tiny little border. There isn't a matching set of dies for this stamp set. We don't do dies for every single stamp set. But this one's very easy to cut out by hand anyway. So the dies are not really needed. And I'll just carry on trimming this around. And I just love the way by adding coloured ink to coloured cardstock, you can create that really sort of funky ombre look. Really nice, I like that. I think I'll be trying that with some other different shapes now I've discovered it as a little technique and I like doing it. Okay, so what we need to do now is I need a copper heart to pop onto my cardstock. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bring in my die cutting machine. I've got a Big Shot here. I've got my magnetic platform, I've got a cutting plate, my copper foil, put my die face down, pop that in there, and then I'm just going to run it through. Apologies if it makes the desk and the camera wobble a little bit. Okay, so that's popped out of there, lovely. So I'm going to put my die to one side. Make sure I don't lose that. And now I want to add a bit more texture to this. I want to add some embossing. So I'm swapping my magnetic plate for my standard platform, and I'm going to use the new Scripty embossing folder. Now for this, I'm going to place my circle in, obviously because it's a circle, it doesn't really matter which way round it is. Now for this, it's a 3D embossing folder, and I know that the sandwich that I need for my embossing machine is I need my Big Shot platform, my embossing folder with my card, then I need this blue platform, and that's going to give me the right thickness to pass this through my Big Shot and to give me the right amount of pressure to give me a nice embossed look on the cardstock. So let's have a look and see how that's come out. Oh yeah, really good. I love that. That's really, really nice. So let me get this machine out of our way. And now it's time to put everything together. So I'm going to make sure I've got my writing the right way up. I'm going to add some dimensionals to the back of my heart, and I'll pop that up onto the embossed copper piece. So try and get that so it's the right way up and fairly central on that panel. And now I'm going to use some wet glue to stick my petal pink panel to the copper panel, like so. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add ribbon around this before I stick it down onto my card. So what I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to do a nice knot. So that's what I did on this example here. I did a knot. So I'm going to do exactly the same. And the way I like to do that, I find my Tombow glue is really good for it because it's got a narrowing top. So I wrap my ribbon around and I tie myself a knot. I always try and tie a square knot, but I don't seem to have the exact knack, but I can kind of do it and make it look reasonable, I think. Okay, so now I've tied that in a double knot, I can slide that off, then I can cut it, and then it gives me a length of ribbon with a nice knot in it. So I want this to wrap around the back of my panel there. So what I like to do is get a little bit of tape runner adhesive, a little bit of our snail, and I'm just going to adjust that over again a little bit because it didn't look quite right. So I'm going to run snail down both sides of this panel. I'm going to position the knot just about where I'm going to want it to be on that side. I shall wrap my ribbon around there and stick it to the snail. Oh, did it not come out? Oh, should we try that again, Karen? I think my snail might be running out, or it doesn't particularly like the shiny surface on the back of the foil. Never mind. We got it there. We got there in the end. So let's do this again. So I'm going to wrap this ribbon around the back and attach it to the snail. Going to wrap it around the other side and attach it to the back of the snail, just so it's sort of loosely stuck down. Can trim off this excess. We don't need all of that on there. And then I'm also going to stick this up on dimensionals. So what I will do is I'll make sure I've got a bit of dimensional also sticking on the back of that ribbon. Then I'm going to pop one in each corner. Let's go for some whole ones. I can use up those scraps on another project. So put a couple in the middle, take off all of these little backings. I've already done that one. A bit more there and a bit more there. Okay, and then making sure I've got this card the right way round, I'm going to layer that down so that I've got an equal border all the way round. I'm now just going to go in with my scissors and I'm just going to trim the ribbon edges a little bit just to make them a little bit prettier rather than just having a flat edge. Okay, I'm going to use my wet glue to stick in my insert. I haven't stamped anything on my insert, but I think because I'm not adding a sentiment to the outside of this card, then I'll probably add a sentiment of some description to the inside. But sometimes I do like to leave a few cards in my stash sentiment free so that I've got them available for different types of occasions and I can add my own message. And I'm going to add yet more dimensionals onto the back of this just to add even more texture. Take off those backings and we are nearly there. So I will just pop that over, try and stick that on straight. And there we have it. We've got a version in gold with the subtle embossing folder and a version in copper using the scripty embossing folder. I hope you enjoyed that video. All of the products that I used are in the description bar below. If you pop on over to my blog, everything's listed there. And thank you for joining me on YouTube. If you want to make sure you get all of my notifications about my videos, please hit the subscribe button and then you'll get a notification that they're there. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.